All right, is Facebook doing dirty tricks to target TikTok? Interesting. Are the right wing stalking reporters online? Of course. But we've got the deets on that, as the kids would say. To help us talk about it, we're brought in Taylor Lorenz, who is an expert on this and is the technology reporter at the Washington Post, where she just busted a huge story wide open. So Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So I wanted to mainly talk about the cyber stalking and bullying that the right wing does that a lot of people have no idea about, that you exposed, but hold, because today you had a bombshell story about how Facebook is using a right wing PR group to target TikTok. So tell us about that first.
Yeah, so Facebook started working with Targeted Victory, which is a right-wing sort of political consulting and comms firm. It's a really big one in DC. And they basically, Meta's contracted them to essentially run a smear campaign against TikTok, basically trashing them in local op-eds and newspapers, letters to the editor, and also by boosting sort of dubious TikTok trend stories in different markets around the country. So it's the kind of thing that you would expect from like a political campaign, but to see a tech company engage in that kind of behavior, I think it just shows where Facebook is at right now.
So Taylor, that's super interesting on a couple of fronts. Do you think that they're doing it because TikTok's a competitor and they're worried about losing customers to them? Or do you think they're doing it to throw the heat off of them because Facebook has a lot of, controversies, et cetera, and they'd rather pin it on TikTok?
Absolutely. I think it's both, to be honest. Number one, they want to destroy any competition. I mean, that's Mark Zuckerberg's way. He didn't engage in this type of stuff with Snapchat, but he famously tries to acquire competitors, and when he can't acquire them, he will quash them. But then publicly, they like to posture TikTok as kind of this success, and we don't need to be regulated, no antitrust, stuff for us, because look at TikTok, it's such a big competitor of ours. And by the way, they have all these problems, right? So I think he's trying to like have his cake and eat it too a little bit with this.
Yeah, look, on the antitrust issue, I'm actually a little bit mixed on that. I think TikTok is huge. And they do make a good point about how much of an antitrust issue do we have? And by the way, let me give my bias. Facebook is one of our biggest partners, okay? So let me be clear about that. But nonetheless, here we go. I think that smearing TikTok in the way that you guys described in the Washington Post piece is horrible for the entire industry. Because Taylor, and I'm curious what you think about this. My sense is that the mainstream media has done that in the past to Facebook, so and to YouTube from time to time. Sometimes there'll be investigative pieces from CNN who barely have any investigative pieces, and where they go, okay, we went and tried to find a needle in a haystack, and we did. Look at these 3 or 4 outrageous needles we found on Facebook and YouTube. Oh my God, advertisers should not be part of this, obviously. We called all of their advertisers because we were so concerned. So did they learn this trick from mainstream media in the first place?
First of all, I covered the adpocalypse. I'm very familiar with that type of reporting. I don't think that Facebook learned it from the mainstream media. I think that everyone is taking this from political campaigns. I mean, this is just classic oppo research and kind of bashing your opponent and planting negative stories, right? This is very common in political races. So I think that that's what Facebook is borrowing from. In terms of the media coverage on YouTube and Facebook and all these platforms, I mean, I just also want to point to the media coverage of TikTok. I think there's this tendency with reporters to, a lot of legacy reporters maybe who don't spend a ton of time on these platforms, to just buy into these sort of cheap and easy stories and narratives like, oh, look, YouTube's doing this or Facebook's doing this. It's like, this is why we need more reporters to really spend time on these platforms, immersed in these communities, so that we can really understand and look, if they're doing something wrong, let's report on it. But like you said, let's not just go hunting for a needle in a haystack and try and make a narrative out of it.
Yeah, and I think that another super interesting part of that story was a lot of people probably don't know that PR companies do this, that they're paid to find op-ed writers and find concerned citizens who write letters to the editor. You probably think it's an actual concerned citizen, but some decent percentage of the time, that's orchestrated by a PR company to push a certain ideology, right?
Exactly. This is just another reason why reporters should not take pitches from PR people ever. I think that, a lot of times those kind of the people behind the scenes can be dubious. It's unclear who's backing things. I think in terms of these op-eds, like you said, a lot of consumers just read op-eds and they don't know these sort of dark arts of PR. So I think exposing these things and kind of explaining the mechanisms of these campaigns helps educate people and hopefully give them a little bit more media literacy, right? Where they're like a little bit more skeptical.
100%. Mainstream media consumers have no idea that half the stuff they're reading is sophisticated PR campaigns meant to influence them in a certain policy direction so that they can make more money off of them. Because honestly, mainstream media never makes that clear. Whether it's generals that work for defense contractors that go all over cable news pushing for war and more weapon systems, and the list goes on and on. But in this particular case, there's one part of it that one particular story that you talked about that I found to be particularly outrageous. It was about what was happening with the schools. There's a licking thing. Licking weird stuff or whatever, and there was punching teachers, and how that didn't actually exist on TikTok, but they said it. So tell us the real story.
Yeah, so last fall this is when I started looking into all of this stuff. So there started to be this explosion of local news coverage of these dangerous TikTok trends. I spend hours and hours a day on TikTok and I cover the company, and I was like, these are not TikTok trends. Like, they're just not. There's actually no evidence that these were ever a thing on TikTok. Where is this coming from? And when, myself and other reporters too really dug into it, a lot of the origins of these sort of alleged TikTok trends were actually Facebook posts in parent groups, or, there's this guy, Officer Gomez, who is kind of, I think, a police person on Facebook and local police pages that were saying, hey, this viral TikTok trend is out there, parents watch out. It was nonsense. It was always bogus, but it plays into parents' fears. It's a little bit like the Tide Pod challenge, right? No one was really like snorting Tide Pods or whatever, but once you put that idea in parents' brains and you feed it to local media that's primed for sort of outrage stories about spooky new platforms, it takes on a life of its own. And that's what Facebook was seeking to amplify.
Yeah, look, a lot of mainstream media reporters are old, and even if they're not old physically, they're old in their way of thinking. So you say YouTube to them, they're like, whoa, what is this newfangled thing? I bet people are eating laundry detergent 24/7 there and punching their teachers. But so we halfway know that, right? But the extra thing that you revealed here as well is that it's a thing that started on Facebook that didn't jump to TikTok, but the PR company that Facebook hired then blamed it on TikTok, even though it wasn't on TikTok.
Exactly.
That's a hell of a thing.
Yeah, the twisted media world that we live in. But I think you have to have that sophistication. And also, frankly, it doesn't even matter how old you are. If you're a reporter, you need to do the actual reporting, right? If people are feeding you stuff saying this is a TikTok trend, you need to really be sure that that's a TikTok trend, right? Like, pull the receipts, let's see the videos. Because you can't just, say things like that.
No, by the way, we have pitch meetings every morning to figure out what we're gonna do on the show. And sometimes we'll get those stories, and because they're so viral, they'll be in the production meeting. And then Anna and I will ask, okay, where's the video on it? How many videos are there? Is it like hundreds of videos or 2 videos out of like millions that are on TikTok? Just basic journalism, right? And you just don't get it in a lot of places. So that's why these PR tricks can work. Last couple of things on this. Targeted Victory says, no, you're wrong, Taylor. And they put out an angry series of tweets saying, why didn't you just call us? We would have told you what the reality is. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I was dying because that thread was such a turn. First of all, we had an email exchange. We included their statement in the story, the statement that he's like, we want to issue this statement. That's in the story they gave us to that days ago. The last email in our conversation, I gave Zach Moffat, the CEO, my phone number and said, "You're welcome to call me." He never called me. He decided to just go on Twitter and complain and spin up, controversy. That's fine. Ultimately, it's so weird because he's trying to cause drama, but then he's like, "But we're actually proud of our work here." And Facebook too didn't dispute this campaign. They actually said, "Actually, we think, we're giving TikTok much needed scrutiny." So they want to kind of blame us, but then also be like, but we didn't do anything wrong anyway. So
yeah.
Ever.
And there's the last irony here is this is a PR group that describes itself as center right. So they're a right-wing outlet used in right-wing political circles. So Taylor, the right wing complains nonstop about Facebook, but isn't the reality that they use tons and tons of Republican consultants and employees, et cetera, all over their management?
Of course. I mean, obviously, and also not only that, but Facebook amplifies right-wing news organizations and voices far more than anyone on the left. Like, look at the top 10, before Facebook cut off access to CrowdTangle, you can see that like the top is like Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino, right? Facebook is is basically like force feeding you right-wing content every single day. But of course it's in the right's interest, right, to claim persecution and claim that they're being silenced, but in fact they're being amplified more than ever, and they found that the company is very sympathetic to their cause. So
it's kind of interesting because Mark Zuckerberg goes to go destroy anything that's in his path from a competitive standpoint, and you could say, hey, listen, free market, that's his right to do that, et cetera. But the right wing 100% unfairly criticizes Facebook, when in reality, Facebook greatly helps the right wing, both in terms of content and then hiring right wing PR, right wing lobbyists. And there's an excellent case to be made. I know that an enormous percentage of Facebook's board is Republican. And yet Zuckerberg doesn't go out to destroy them, doesn't even lay a finger on them. Somehow the one set of folks that are actually the most vicious to him, he does nothing to.
Yeah.
Seems like an interesting irony.
I know. And by the way, Facebook recognizes that. They know, that their relationship with Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen and all of these right-wing people in tech, it's well documented, like you said. And they know that, but they, these narratives are not spun out of accuracy. They're spun to kind of whip up controversy or anger among people that don't know any better. And so I think that's what they gain from those kind of persecution narratives. It's kind of sort of angering their base, right? And people that don't have time to really look in and say, well, that doesn't actually make any sense, right?
Yeah, people in media know that generally, most of them, some of them. Consumers have no idea. Like when I tweeted about your story and said it's ironic that it's Facebook that's right wing gets hit by the right, every commenter from the right wing is like, oh, get a load of this crazy guy. Everybody knows Facebook's the most liberal thing on earth, and then they discriminate against us. Poor right wing, we're the victims. None of them know it. The right wing propaganda works perfectly on them. Okay, so now speaking of the right-wing zealots, let's go to what we're gonna talk about, okay? So you also expose something that is a significant problem, Taylor, that almost no one else talks about. So if you're a reporter that does accurate reporting about right-wing, especially in the technology field and online communities and online stories, or you're progressive at all that's online, I know from personal experience, and almost every progressive that's online gets this. You are viciously attacked and cyber stalked online at a minimum for the rest of your life. Yet everybody takes it as like, oh yeah, that's normal, but it isn't normal, is it, Taylor?
No, it's not normal. It's incredibly disruptive and harmful, and I think it needs to be exposed and called out. I mean, this is the problem: is that people in journalism just accept this situation or this environment, or they minimize it because legacy journalists don't have an understanding of the internet and what harm a really bad smear campaign on the internet can do. Meanwhile, consumers don't have any kind of media literacy, so they see these Fox News controversies and then they believe them. And then even worse, media company leaders buy into them as well. They see enough Fox News articles about their own reporter and they're like, oh, why are you so controversial all of a sudden, right? Like, what have you done? When in reality, it's usually just doing their job or reporting critically on a lot of, these forces behind the scenes.
So as you were listing the different tactics they use, I was going through in my head, yep, I've gotten that. So I don't know if they do it to every single person in the same exact way, but I literally got the entire kitchen sink that you described. But for those who are not aware, because why would they be aware? If it's never happened to them, they have no idea that it happens, right? So what are some of those tactics that they use online?
Yeah, it's about reputational harm. So a lot of what these sort of extremist, political factions have realized is that the way to attack the mainstream media is to discredit the most prominent reporters at whatever publication, right? So that means, say I'm at the New York Times, right? It's discrediting me and other, actually this venture capitalist Balaji said in a couple of emails, vulnerable reporters. So women, people of color, usually anybody that's outspoken about social causes, those are the people that they're gonna sort of fixate on and take down. And it's not mean tweets, okay? I cover YouTubers for a living. I don't care whatsoever about mean tweets, but it's the sustained sort of campaign to discredit you and smear your credibility. So that means, Tucker Carlson doing repeated segments. It means nonstop articles about you. It means reframing everything you do, right? I, for instance, went to go cover this 16-year-old TikTok star's birthday party. This is a red carpet event. There's, representatives from UTA, WME, and everything. I'm there for my job writing about her. And the right-wing media wrote this entire, media cycle about how I'm a predator because I showed up to a 16-year-old's birthday, as if children, I guess, don't have adults at their birthday parties. Very weird. But it's about driving those types of narratives, specifically narratives around child predator things or, sort of, the type of thing, it's these types of things that kind of stick with people viscerally. It's not, oh, Taylor's a bad reporter, we don't like her article. It's Taylor is raping children at the Hype House, right? That's the kind of thing that they've written about. And
yeah, and Taylor, I saw the genesis of that. So first of all, the original genesis of liberals are killing children or harming children is abortion. So that's how they started in the first place. Oh, we're cutting taxes on the rich, we're increasing taxes on you, we're ruining your lives economically, but they're killing children, right? And drinking the blood of babies that QAnon and nut job right wing does, etc. That's blood libel from the old days that they used to say about Jews before they massacred them. So some of this is as old as time. But I remember the genesis of them doing it as a concerted effort publicly and admitting it. It was the alt-right. It was, I'm not gonna say the guy's name, I don't wanna give him further publicity. And he said, look, let's just call them child predators and pedophiles. It doesn't matter if it's true because it'll just show up at the top of their Google search. And when you talk about vulnerable people, especially if they're less famous, it'll be at the very top of their Google search and it'll haunt them the rest of their lives. That way we'll intimidate the left into not speaking up. And that was about, it was right around the time that they targeted Sam Cedar in a very similar way. So I'm gonna say about 6 years ago. And hasn't that playbook played out exactly as he described it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's more powerful and well-oiled than ever. I mean, the insane SEO manipulation, I actually did a thread on this on Twitter, but they do all of these things. I mean, this one guy wrote a script to message 180,000 people, every single person that followed me, a lot of people that followed the Washington Post with these allegations that I'm a child predator and I'm unethical, whatever. And he called me Taylor Lopez. A lot of people were like, wow, what an idiot. The troll misspelled your name. No. That means you Google me and then you see a flood of articles that says Taylor Lopez, formerly Taylor Lorenz, she's changed her name. She's a child sex predator named Taylor Lopez that changed her name to Taylor Lorenz to get a job at the Washington Post. It's just better because they know that Taylor Lorenz, I have a strong, Google, like it's harder for them to kind of get to the top that way. So they do these workarounds. I mean, so many different syndication scams and things like that. But this is a whole apparatus that's operating sort of right under the surface. It's not just mean tweets. Who cares about that, you know?
Imagine you're a private individual, or you're just in media, but you've never been attacked like this. And Taylor, isn't the number one? Not only does it discombobulate, and it's psyops, it's against the target, but even more importantly, everyone around that target, whether it's their employer, it's their friends and family, get worried. Oh my God, is it true? And if I defend them, am I going to be accused? And then I'm going to have this toxic sludge all over me.
Yeah, I mean, I've lost so many career opportunities. I got canceled from a big podcast that I was supposed to be on because they didn't want the controversy, right? I'm suddenly seen as controversial despite never being that way before, before these people decide to target me. And you see this over and over again. And that's why I've been so outspoken about calling out big legacy media companies, because it's time for them to learn how the internet works. I think actually YouTubers and content creators really understand these types of campaigns. They deal with like T accounts and other people kind of misrepresenting them. Media companies continue to buy into these bad faith attacks and punish their reporters. Like you said, I'm a little bit like you, Cenk, in the sense that like people know who I am. I have an online following that I've been growing for over a decade. So it's harder to kind of take me down. Colleagues of mine at the New York Times, right, only had a couple thousand followers, or they don't have these online personalities that will back them up. And so I just think it's really important to educate consumers about this stuff and hold media companies accountable when they don't have their own employees' backs.
Well, not only that, I mean, look, I know you worked at the New York Times, but so the alt-right started a bunch of toxic attacks against me when I formed Justice Democrats, because they were worried that was going to work. Guess what? It did work. And later when I ran for Congress, the New York Times just used them without doing any fact checking. They called me anti-Muslim when I'm Muslim. I mean, and they took like outrageous things, like a joke about bestiality. And the New York Times made it seem like it was in my platform. I mean, that's alt-right to mainstream without any fact checking.
Yes, and when we don't understand that, and when we have people in a newsroom that are not educated about the internet, and people aren't educated about the shapes of these campaigns, like you said, they're quoting absolute trolls, or they're quoting them as like, oh, well, these people just run like a film podcast or something. It's like, well, let's talk about who funds that podcast or who backs these people, right? Like, it's this like sanitization of a lot of these figures. And so, I mean, again, this just goes back to basic internet literacy. This is why we need to educate media people, legacy media people, about how the internet works.
But it's true, like you're exposing it more than anyone else is. And every time I read it, I go, oh, thank God, finally someone doing actual journalism. So along that line, one last thing. Look, as I look at their tactics, it's got psyops written all over it, right? So because it's the same patterns over and over again. So you'll see they'll go to my account and they'll say, Cenk, I used to be a fan, but I'm not anymore. I'm so disappointed, right? Then you'll see they'll go to David Sirota's account during the fight with Jimmy Dore and the fake left and the weirdo alt-right that's pretending to be left and all that stuff. They'll go to David Sirota's account and they'll be like, oh, David, I used to read your stuff all the time, but I don't anymore, right? They go to Ryan Grimm's account, same exact thing, right? And then they go to their allies and go, oh, you're going to be interviewed by David Sirota? Ooh, did you know this and this about him? I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a classic smear campaign, and we need to educate people about this, because otherwise they get a message like that and they're like, what? Instead of being like, oh, I know what this is. I know what this is and I'm not gonna fall for it.
100%. I'll end on this. I interviewed Noam Chomsky recently, and during the interview and after the interview when we were talking, he said, look, he said he was as optimistic as he's ever been, Taylor. You know why? Well, first of all, I didn't know why. I said, what? Why is Chomsky optimistic? He said, because the younger generation is coming up. And when they do, they're very progressive, and they're just going to be the new people that are in those positions, and it'll make all the difference. And I think that you're an excellent example of that. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and joining us today, because Cenk Uygur's away, is Farron Cousins, host of Ring of Fire, friend of the show, and just an all-around awesome person. Farron, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been quite a fun week here.
Well, you're going to be with us for the entirety of the show today, and I just want to thank you publicly for that, because the original plan was for me to do a solo first hour, but I didn't know if I had the energy to do it thanks to my COVID issue, but you're gonna be great. You have a lot of strong opinions on a lot of the stories that we have on the show today, and I'm really looking forward to it. Before we get started though, everyone, just want to encourage you to like and share the stream if you're watching us online, and become a member. If you haven't become one yet, you can do so on YouTube if that's where you're watching us by just clicking on that join button, and you'll be given various membership options. And if you're not watching us on YouTube, maybe you're watching us on some other platform, you can always go to tyt.com/join, where today we're gonna have an excellent bonus episode. We're gonna talk about crazy moments in American history. It's actually pretty recent history, but there's still issues, there's stories that I actually knew nothing about, and they're mind-blowing. So again, you can become a member by going to tyt.com/join. Now, before we get to any of the fun stuff though, we gotta talk about this creep who just got indicted in Virginia, and authorities have just found fetal remains in her basement. So let's give you the details. DC police have found 5 fetuses in the home of an anti-abortion activist named Lauren Handy. Now, Lauren Handy is based in Virginia, but she has gotten in trouble with the law quite a few times previously because of her illegal anti-choice activism. We'll detail that for you in just a moment, but before we do, let's get to the issue at hand, shall we? The fact that this woman had fetal remains in her home. Well, officers responded to the home of this anti-choice activist, Lauren Handy, to investigate a tip about potential biohazard material in the residence. Once inside, they located the fetuses. The remains were collected by the DC office of the chief medical examiner. So the authorities were given some sort of tip. They decided to follow through with that tip, follow up on it, and see if there was any truth to it. And all of a sudden, we find out that this woman did in fact have 5 different fetuses stored in her home in Virginia. Now, she has gotten in trouble with the law fairly recently. Back in 2020, she and 8 other anti-choice activists were terrorizing women at an abortion clinic, and we'll give you the details on that in just a moment. But what I found fascinating is, in some areas, she's actually quite honest. So here's a tweet from a reporter who tried to get some statement from her after this story broke. When I asked anti-abortion activist Lauren Handy what homicide detectives pulled out of her house Wednesday, she only said, quote, "People will freak out when they hear." And guess what? She was right. People are freaking out because this is incredibly creepy. And of course, everyone is wondering, where did these fetuses come from? Now, the authorities haven't clarified that. They're not answering any questions about where the fetuses came from. We don't know if they belong to her. We don't know if it belongs to some other medical facility that she might have broken into. But something that you should know about is the fact that she had bragged on Facebook about gaining access to the University of Washington in Seattle, and essentially having access to the refrigerators there. So there's some belief that maybe she could have stolen the fetal remains from that facility. It's really unclear what the truth is. So it was a deep walk-in freezer that she was bragging about gaining access to on March 23rd. So Farron, as we know, right-wingers are incredibly obsessed with doing away with a woman's right to choose, doing away with a woman's agency, liberty, ability to make decisions about her own body. And there's always been a creepy component to that, this component of control. But this kind of takes things to a whole new level.
Right, I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around any capacity where she would need, these fetal remains. I still can't quite, make sense of any of this yet, because it is just so disturbing. And like you said, everything is still breaking here. But we do have something throughout the United States. Each state is a little bit different, but we have abuse of corpse laws that basically say that you cannot have any human remains in your home, like on your property, anything of that sort. So there's all kinds of laws here that she very easily, could be prosecuted for, depending on, maybe there's a legitimate scientific reason here. I highly doubt that that is the case whatsoever. But assuming there's not one, yeah, she is facing all sorts of different state and potentially federal charges for just having these in her possession. And if it is tied to her gaining access to these, university refrigerators, then that's a very serious crime. And so I think based on everything that's happened and everything with her history, multiple instances of, getting in trouble with the law, let's say, because a lot of them weren't prosecuted. But yeah, she has a history. It's going to work against her in this, and she's probably going away for a very long time.
I hope so.
Yeah, pretty much what I think is going to happen here.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, who knows what is likely to happen? She's gotten in trouble with some pretty serious charges as a result of her so-called activism. And every single time the charges have been lessened or they've been dropped. But there's one exception, and it has to do with what she and her fellow anti-choice zealots did in October of 2020. I want to get to those details right now. So Handy was indicted along with 9 others on Wednesday by a federal grand jury. So she's facing federal charges, but not for the fetuses. We don't know what the charges for the fetuses will be yet. But Handy is accused of felony conspiracy against rights for a blockade inside a DC abortion clinic in October of 2020. What she did breaks federal laws. So she along with her friends, essentially blocked women from being able to gain access to the clinic that they were targeting. Prosecutors say that Handy called the clinic pretending to be a woman named Hazel Jenkins, who needed an abortion and made an appointment for the morning of October 22nd, 2020. That morning, Handy allegedly approached a clinic employee and said she was Hazel Jenkins, there for an appointment. When the employee opened the door, the indictment says Handy and her other co-defendants, forced their way into the clinic. In the process, they allegedly knocked a clinic employee over, causing her to injure her ankle. And then once inside, the defendants allegedly moved chairs to block the entrance to the clinic's treatment area and used chains and rope to tie them together. Now, back in the 1990s, this was actually a pretty common tactic used by right-wing anti-choice zealots who loved having control over women's bodies. And so hundreds of them would get together and they would block the entrance to these clinics. And at that point, luckily, when Congress apparently still was managing to accomplish something, passed a law that would prevent that from happening. They're able to protest outside the clinic. We see that happening all the time. That's something that's protected by the First Amendment, but blocking entry, blocking access to a woman to these clinics is against the law, which is why these individuals have now been indicted. But again, I want to reiterate that indictment is for what happened in October of 2020. We still don't know what the consequences will be or what the charges will be for the fetuses that she was storing in her basement in Virginia.
When we have stories like this and we see what these so-called activists they do here, and thank goodness this wasn't a more extreme instance that they got arrested for, because we've seen that far too many times. But what gets me about all of this is that there's no actual concern for children in this country among these Republicans. We have children right now that are going hungry, and they're going hungry partly because there's not any Republicans in DC that want to do the free school lunches. They're still trying to cut back on that. They're blocking it at the state level. They're not doing anything about the extended child tax credit that we know lifted tens of millions of kids out of poverty in the last few months of last year. There are kids suffering in this country right now, and they're only suffering more and more thanks to these right-wing crazies that are running these states. They're targeting the LGBTQ youth. Kids are suffering. And if Republicans actually cared like they claim to, we've got to protect the children, we're out here protecting them. No, you're not. You're letting them die because they can't get medication. You're making them orphans because their parents can't afford the insulin. There's all sorts of things these people could be putting their bodies and their minds to doing to actually create some good in this country, to better the lives of children. They're refusing to do it because they're hung up on this one issue that, quite frankly, is none of their damn business at all. But they want to shove themselves into it when we have kids on the street right now that don't know if they're going to get another meal ever. And that's what it is.
I mean, we deal with that hypocrisy on a daily basis. I mean, this woman, Handy, actually was interviewed by a reporter for Human Rights Watch. And she was encouraging young people, minors, to break federal laws in an effort to prevent women from being able to go to an abortion clinic. And when the reporter asked her about that, like, are you encouraging them to break the law? She just flat out admitted. By the way, I tweeted that story. I highly recommend you guys check it out. It's by Human Rights Watch. And she just flat out transparently admits to encouraging minors to break the law, okay? Which would mean what? Which could mean that they would face prosecution. They could potentially be locked up for what they're doing. That could ruin their lives. But she doesn't really care about the lives of these kids. She doesn't really care. For her, look, I don't really know fully what's motivating her. She seems unhinged. Anyone who would steal fetal remains or have fetal remains from anywhere in their home clearly has some issues and needs to be, I think she needs to be evaluated aside from prosecuted for what she's done. But if you look at the right-wing movement in this country overall, I mean, you gave perfect examples. This effort to do away with any type of social program that would make children living in poverty whole, that would ensure that they have a roof over their heads, food on their table, and their basic needs met. It's always the right wing that fights back against it. And once you confront them about this hypocrisy, they immediately go to the argument of, well, why should we be funding the deadbeat lifestyles of the parents? Well, what about the kids? What about the kids? You just want to abandon the kids that you claim to want to protect so much? I mean, look what's happening in Texas, where transgender youth are being prevented from getting the medical treatment that they need, including mental health treatment. Okay, we know that suicide ideation is something that's prevalent among young transgender individuals. It doesn't matter, they don't care. For them, for politicians, and I know this without a shadow of a doubt, these types of issues, these types of culture war issues are nothing more than props for their political campaigns. That's it. They couldn't care less about anyone's life. I think we see that play out in places like Texas, where there isn't like a school shooting they don't love. They take the school shooting and use it as an opportunity to politicize how we need more guns in the country, which usually translates to more children getting shot up in their own damn schools, okay? That's who the right wing is. And then they turn around and they try to make us seem like the creeps when we want women to have freedom to choose what to do with their own bodies. They should have agency. They should have the ability to make these types of decisions with themselves and their doctors, and that's it. But they want to get involved. Politicians for political purposes, the right wing specifically for control. If you look at how abortion or how evangelicals came to be so obsessed with abortion in this country, take a look at how they used it as a political prop during the Reagan administration, in order to rally support to the evangelical right. That's all it's ever been about. It's about control, it's about power. And we need to fight back against this aggressively, not only in the context of reproductive rights, but also in the context of our transgender brothers and sisters who are being targeted right now for political purposes. Other members of the LGBTQ community who, we thought, oh, gay marriage is legalized, things are headed in the right direction. You see right wingers like Charlie Kirk, for instance, doing a full-on assault on those rights as we speak. We need to fight back against it. These are not people who love freedom. These are people who love control. These are people who love to force their religious ideology on everyone else in a country that's supposed to believe in a separation of church and state.
And we have, or at least for the moment, Roe versus Wade that should have solidified this. And unfortunately, because of this, now hugely partisan Supreme Court and Republicans getting crafty with the way they, draft these anti-choice laws, they're whittling that away. And there's no backup for that, by the way. And I hope people understand that kind of a ramification. Once this thing gets whittled down to where it's virtually useless throughout this country, it's going to be almost impossible to get back to where we were. This is going to lead to dead women. And Republicans are okay with that. I mean, they've made it clear that they're okay with that, toying with the idea of maybe if you seek an abortion, maybe we should give you the death penalty. Maybe we should kill you. So they have no absolute regard for any living creature in this country. It's either for political gain, or as you say, it's just this control issue because they have these deep-seated problems, which is what they are with themselves, that they feel the need to do this. This doesn't benefit anybody, right? This doesn't make anybody's life any better. It puts lives in danger, and they could not care less about it because it's a wonderful political issue because it gets the stupidest people out here engaged and out to the polls. And that's what it's always been about. How can we convince these people who don't think for themselves to come out and vote for us? Oh, we'll use these wedge issues. We'll use the culture wars. We'll do all of the stupidest talking points that have no bearing on their life, but they'll vote about it. And then we get to screw them over financially, and any other way we can, because that's what they always do.
Yeah, you're so right about that. I see that as the primary driver of the culture war issues that the right wing engages in. It's a perfect way to politicize people while distracting them from the fact that the very people politicizing them are robbing them blind. That's the Republican Party. That is what they do. They want tax cuts for the rich. They want to empower and embolden corporations to mistreat their workers. They love that system. They see that more and more Americans, both on the left and the right, are fired up about the economic insecurity that they're feeling. And that would require politicians to do something about it, right? It would require them to address it, but they can't address it. Their corporate donors don't want them to address it. So what do they do instead? They target the most powerless people in our society, direct hatred toward them, direct terrible policy toward them or against them. And we all suffer as a consequence of that. The country becomes less and less free as a result of that. And so this is something that really fires me up. We'll definitely keep track of this story and see where it goes as it develops. But for now, we got to take a brief break. When we come back, we're gonna dig into the housing market and what the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas has to say about a possible housing market crash. Come right back. Hey friends, welcome back to our social break. Just want to encourage you guys to check out Jordan Yule's deep dive tonight on our Twitch stream, twitch.tv/TYT. And speaking of Twitch, just want to say thank you to Frank Morningtree, who gifted 10 subs. You are fantastic. Thank you so much for the support. Gaunch also has been subscribed to us for 9 months through Prime and is very excited to see you, Farron. Gaunch says, yay, Farron. RC Tycoon says, that is fair to reference the laws of remains, but the crazy right might say that if you claim these are bodies, then they would hang their hat on that. You called a fetus a body and therefore it was a person, a weird line we'd have to walk. Yeah, look, anything that's not viable outside of a woman's womb is not a person. Okay, at 6 weeks, for instance, the idea that there is a fully formed heart and this is a viable individual outside a woman's womb is nonsense. Look, they know they're lying. They know that they're framing this in a way that is incredibly deceitful. And again, we gotta just hone in, like focus on the fact that they're doing this, not because they think fetuses are human lives, okay? But more importantly, because they see this as a tool to accumulate power. That's what it's about. That's all it's about. Are there a handful of religious people in this country who have a problem with abortion and are like legitimately not in favor of it? Sure, I believe they exist. But they're usually the ones who practice what they preach. Right wingers like that Congressman Desjardins went off and got his mistress pregnant, forced her to have an abortion. His wife had an abortion. I mean, they're complete hypocrites. They don't actually care about the issue. They use it as a wedge issue for power, as Farron said. So Peter Hamby writes in our super chat section and says, given the thought, and if Madison did attend these outrageous parties, I would imagine that at least one of his legs still works. No haiku today. I don't know what that's a reference to at all, but I'm glad I read your comment anyway. Calepsis says, hey guys, after watching the show on Tuesday, I've decided I need the address for the TYT studio. I'm going to send you a 3-foot tall digital clock that Edwin can use as a jank filibuster timer. That's really, really funny. I think you're referring to the story that jank filibustered toward the end of the show, which I got a little grumpy about that, I'm not gonna lie. Ray Turner, AKA the Bearded Dragon says, Farron is cool and has a beautiful puppy. Farron,
yeah.
Next social break, I'm gonna need to see Aspen, okay? You can't be hiding Aspen.
Yeah, I imagine at some point she's probably gonna come running down here into the studio. I'm just hoping she doesn't do it very loudly. But if she does, I'll get her on camera. She's super cute and fun, and it's just who doesn't love puppies? I mean, you have
everyone. All right, we gotta get back to the show. To the show, Anna Kasparian and Farron Cousins with you. We just finished a segment on a creepy anti-abortion activist who was found to have fetal remains in her basement. But she's actually pretty lucky to have a basement and a house to live in. Many Americans don't have that. And there is an ongoing housing crisis. I wanted to talk about that a little bit because it turns out that now some so-called experts are concerned about a housing market crash. Let's get into it. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas is warning about the increased likelihood that the housing market could collapse. Now they're worried because it seems like for the first time ever, they realize that housing prices seem a little detached from other economic fundamentals, including the amount of money people are able to make, the expenses that they have. And I just think it's so fascinating that this has been going on for years and years. And now they're like, oh, it looks like these homes might be overvalued. What's at play here? Well, we'll get into the details of what they're saying, but I think it's also important to dig into what their proposed solutions are, or at least what they're hinting at in regard to proposed solutions. They write, our evidence points to abnormal US housing market behavior for the first time since the boom of the early 2000s. Let's pause, I already have to pause. Really? For the first time since the early 2000s? Okay, these are the experts, by the way. Reasons for concern are clear in certain economic indicators, which show signs that 2021 house prices appear increasingly out of step with fundamentals. Prices may be rising to a point that they call exuberance, in which prices become increasingly out of sync with the economic fundamentals underpinning the market. The consequences of housing market exuberance can include overpriced homes, investments based on distorted expectations of returns, and reduced economic growth and employment. So what are the causes? Like what would likely cause this bubble to burst? And this is what I want you guys to focus on. The cycle is interrupted when policymakers intervene, spurring investors to become cautious and causing the flow of money into housing to dry up. Let me read that again. Causing the flow of money into houses to dry up. This could cause a housing correction or possibly even a bust. Now, there has already been a little bit of intervention recently by the Federal Reserve. What did the Federal Reserve do? They agreed to finally increase interest rates because private equity firms, financial institutions, major banks have been getting cheap money, zero interest money from the Federal Reserve. And what do they do with that money? They take it and they snatch up the limited inventory of homes on the market. And while you might be a renter and you might not think that's such a big deal, it translates into higher rental prices as well because they don't flip those homes. What they end up doing is they keep the homes as rentals and they become these slumlords that get to charge higher rent. And people who get priced out of the market that maybe they were interested in living in or have been living in for their entire lives, they end up going to other parts of the country to rent. And that drives up the rental prices in those areas as well. It has a domino effect that's been incredibly destructive and damaging to working Americans. So they talk about investing and how investors have actually been a huge component, but they don't really talk about, hey, maybe there should be a policy that prevents this type of speculation within the housing industry. Maybe there needs to be a policy that prevents these investors from taking cheap money from the Federal Reserve and then pouring it into the housing market. They don't make that point. They seem to focus more on the need to, take a look at what kind of intervention might happen on a governmental level and how that could spur some sort of housing market collapse. And let me just be clear about something. Yes, there are many housing markets that are overvalued right now as a result of this speculative behavior. We'll talk about the possible correction in just a moment, but Farron, so far I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Well, right now you have investors buying 33% of the homes that are currently being sold in the United States right now. 33% are going to investors, not to people who are, hey, we gotta buy a house, we're starting a family, we just got married, or we're retiring. 33%, a third of them are going to investors because they look at real estate not as we need a roof over our head, but as a money-making opportunity. And once you turn the housing market into a commodity like that, that's when things always go haywire. And of course, as you pointed out, the same thing was happening in the early 2000s. Everybody was gonna get into the house flipping business, right? We're gonna buy these cheap properties. We're gonna dump $20,000 into it. We're gonna sell them for $100,000 more than what we paid for it. Boom, huge profit. And it happened all over the place. And that's actually a big part, maybe not the biggest part, obviously, but that's a huge part of what was happening in the early 2000s that always gets overlooked. Mm-hmm. All these, up and coming house flippers and things like that. And we glorify it. We put reality shows on TV talking about how great this is and what a great investment it can be for people. And what they do is they price the market way above what anybody in these areas can even afford at this point. Here in Florida, I actually found this out today, we have 1.6 million vacant homes. 1.6 million homes sitting empty in this state. And of course, this comes at a time when we have rents increasing throughout the state of Florida by 30 to 50%. And kind of harking back to what we talked about earlier, what is our governor doing? Is he talking about these economic problems? Is he talking about the fact that we can't afford houses? No, he's not. He's not talking about the rent going up 30%. He's talking about we got to prevent transgender women from playing in women's sports. We've got to focus on these culture war issues because our economy here in Florida is going straight to hell. And it's going there very, very quickly. We are seeing job growth, but it's in the service industry, where if you don't get a tip, you're only making $2.13 per hour to roll silverware. Okay, we are not doing well here. And this is, of course, happening all over the country. But it's because of the investors. I mean, that is a huge driver of what is happening now when they buy up these cheap properties and then sell it back to the people who could have bought it, at the cheaper price for 25, 35, 50% more than what they just paid for it a month ago, because that's how fast they're turning them around here.
And also keep in mind that, the one remaining area for working Americans to build wealth in this country was the housing market. And I'm not talking about, engaging in the housing market as speculators, but more importantly, purchasing a home that they want to live in, right? And then throughout, decades, the value of that home goes up and they build wealth that way. Many people relied on that as their retirement plan, for instance. And so that one remaining, facet of building wealth in America has been ripped away from people because, of course, the very individuals who are already incredibly privileged, already living affluent lives, people who are already millionaires and billionaires, they just didn't have enough. They didn't have enough. They had to do away with, by the way, not just an avenue in which people built wealth, but more importantly, do away with a basic necessity to survive, which is housing. Again, it's not just impacting those who are looking to buy, it's also impacting those who are looking to rent. And to your point, Farron, Florida has been one of the targets for these massive financial institutions and equity firms. For instance, Tampa, Florida is where a lot of these investors are pouring in. They're buying up the single family homes. And when you see them sitting empty, it's not because no one owns them. More often than not, they're owned by these speculators. And either they're using it as some sort of tax write-off, claiming that they're taking a loss as a result of it sitting empty, or they end up renting it, and the community changes as a result of that. Because there have been stories about various neighborhoods, mostly Black and brown neighborhoods across the country, where most of the homes have now turned into rentals, and the corporations that are renting them out don't do the necessary vetting or don't keep up the property. And so it ends up becoming a complete and utter disaster within the community, and people are upset about it, right? People end up having parties, there's issues with violence and crime, but they don't care. You think the investors care about that? As long as they're collecting their rent or as long as they've got their tax write-off, that's all they care about. And one other thing I wanna mention, you talk about Ron DeSantis and his failure to address this issue. He'll never address this issue. This is not a priority for Republicans. This is the type of corruption and greed that they love. It's their bread and butter. But I'm gonna say the same thing about Democrats, both on a state level, because we're experiencing this in California as well, but more importantly, on a federal level. This isn't even on Joe Biden's radar. I don't even hear anyone in Congress talking about this issue. And this is a huge problem. The Washington Post, for instance, just reported that last year investors bought nearly 1 in 7 homes sold in the nation's top metropolitan areas, the most in 2 decades of record keeping, according to the Washington Post analysis. And I wanna look at this map real quick because it shows you Charlotte. Charlotte is one of the major metropolitan areas where this is becoming more and more of a problem. And if you look at the darker the area on the map is, the more speculative behavior you see in the housing market there. So you're seeing huge chunks of Charlotte being snatched up by these investors who, again, are just looking to hoard more wealth for themselves. And it's absolutely sick behavior.
And we always see these Republicans telling people that are out of work, just go get a job, contribute to society. No, why are you not saying this to people who just buy homes and sell them as a job? That's not a job.
Right.
Like that's not a thing that you should be able to do here in the United States. Like real estate investment, I'm sorry. I just feel like that shouldn't be an industry that exists. Housing should be a human right. That is where we need to be. And we need to start pushing the politicians who are willing to come out and say that, but also do something about it, right? We've seen too many times where they say something and maybe not follow through with it. But we need that codified into law here in the United States. If you want to own rental properties, down in sunny Florida or anywhere along the beach, go ahead and do that as long as the needs of the communities are being met and people who need houses can still get them.
I agree.
If we have extra, go ahead, make your money off that. I'm okay with that. But at a time when we have rampant homelessness and we have more empty homes than homeless people, not okay. Absolutely no excuse for this as a country. And we need federal laws, like you said, federal, to address this, because the states aren't going to do it. The states don't care. This has to come from DC or it's not going to work.
Absolutely. Well, you're unlikely to hear this kind of perspective on most legacy news outlets, and there's a reason for that. It turns out that they have more interest in access journalism than ensuring that real information gets to their audiences and to their readers. And I want to give you a prime example of that. Let's move over to CBS, where they decided to hire one of Trump's goons, and it looks like their employees aren't happy about it, but there's a very specific reason why they did it. So it turns out that CBS's decision to hire former Trump acting chief of staff Mick Mulvaney was to basically ensure that they have access to the Republican Party. In fact, their co-president said as much recently. Let me give you his quote. If you look at some of the people that we've been hiring on a contributor basis, being able to make sure that we are getting access to both sides of the aisle is a priority, because we know the Republicans are going to take over, most likely in the midterms. A lot of the people that we're bringing in are helping us in terms of access to that side of the equation. And while it's clear that they're engaging in access journalism, because literally their co-president of news made that very, very clear in this leaked audio, they are, denying that they're doing this for any type of nefarious purpose. A senior CBS News producer addressed the backlash to the Mulvaney hiring on Tuesday by pointing to the 74.2 million Americans who voted for Trump in 2020. So what? I mean, it's one thing to provide the perspective or report on the perspective of right-wing voters in the country. No one's saying to prevent that from happening. But it's something entirely different to have ideologues hired as contributors who do analysis and are expected to give the news to your audience. And that's exactly what happened when CBS introduced Mick Mulvaney as their recent hire. Let me remind you of what that looked like.
Biden has announced a $5.8 trillion budget proposal for the 2023 fiscal year, which includes a wealth tax for the richest people in the country. Households with assets of more than $100 million would face a minimum tax of 20%. So here to discuss is Mick Mulvaney. He's a former Office of Management and Budget Director. And today I am pleased to welcome him as a CBS News contributor. So happy to have you here. Thank you so much. You're the guy to ask about this.
No, he's not the guy to ask about it. In fact, he was asked to detail what the proposal was, which is the job of a journalist, which is the job of a reporter, not the job of a former Trump White House official and an ideologue who gutted the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That is not news, that's garbage. That's essentially uplifting right-wing propaganda and repackaging it and laundering it as news. Farron.
It drives me insane when we see these networks do this. Like, oh, we're gonna hire this person because we need access to Republicans. We need access to members of Congress. I spent many years as the producer on Ring of Fire Radio, some of them when I was still waiting tables in the evening. I never had any problem reaching out to Congress. It's fairly easy. Their phone numbers are actually public, and I'm sure saying I'm with CBS News, probably pretty easy to get access to really anybody you want. So I think it's total BS when they try to say like, oh, this is all about access. No, it's about ideology. You're trying to cater to this group of people for a specific reason. It's just like with John Brennan, when he got hired by NBC, MSNBC a couple years ago. They allow some of the most horrid people we have seen throughout recent American history to go on there and effectively remake their image. Mick Mulvaney is now not the guy that destroyed, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He's just the guy out there giving you the news. He's not the guy who said, oh, Trump's phone call with Zelensky was bad, but the media is overblowing it. No, he's the guy just telling you what's happening in the country today. He's on a trustworthy source. so maybe he's a trustworthy guy. That's what happens with these people, and they get paid the big bucks to go out there and pretend like all the horrible things they've ever done never happened, and the public buys into it too. And that's really the worst part of it. 6 months from now, Mulvaney's not going to be remembered for any of the horrible things he did. He's just going to be the friendly guy that comes on and tells us what's really happening with the Biden administration on CBS. That's what this is going to turn into, because they want a piece of that right-wing audience. That's the access they really want. They can get anybody from DC to come on their program that they want. I guarantee they got no problems with that. They want access to those hardcore Republicans. They want to take the Fox News, the Newsmax people, and turn them into regular CBS Sunday morning viewers. That's the access they're after.
I mean, they're so delusional about that, because why would Trump supporters or any like rabid right-winger turn his or her back on Newsmax, OAN, Fox News to go listen to CBS? Is CBS willing to stoop to the level of the outlets I just listed? I don't think they are, although who knows? These days, I don't know what they're capable of. And remember, during the Trump administration, during the 2016 election, there was a video that was leaked, audio actually, that was leaked of the former head of CBS, Les Moonves. And he was actually very clear about how, at the end of the day, profit, ratings, that's the only thing they genuinely care about. Take a listen.
Who would have thought that this circus would come to town? But it may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS. That's all I got to say. So, what can I say? It's the money's rolling in, and polls are open. This is fun. I've never seen anything like this, and this is going to be a very good year for us.
It's going to be a very good year for them, Farron. I mean, it's fun. It's fun. I mean, it's bad for America, but it's good for ratings. Am I right? Like, that is what their number one priority is. And what I find so fascinating is, look, I get it. I totally understand the pressures that come along with creating programming that is sustainable, right? Like, you still have to make money in order to survive. But I've found that places like TYT, places like Ring of Fire, all of these independent news sources are still able to cover the news fairly, accurately, without laundering the reputations of all sorts of terrible people. We're not millionaires, we're not making a ton of money, but I think we're in it for the right reasons. We're making a living, I'm happy about that, right? But we're able to share information, share the news with the audience. We're open about our own personal biases, of course. And we're not helping to clear up the reputation of individuals who do not deserve to have their reputations laundered in any way.
And we're not afraid to call out either side either. As you mentioned, yes, we all have biases. I mention it all the time on Ring of Fire. But I'm also not afraid to shy away when Biden screws up, just as you're not and TYT isn't. Like, hey, the Democrats did something really horrible here. Let's talk about it. You're not going to get that from any of these Republican folks. They absolutely refuse to admit it, unless, of course, it's Madison Cawthorn this week. That set them off. But for the most part, we are fair. And we do have a lot of fun with it. We're not trying to cater to any specific groups. We're not trying to change who we are as individuals. We're out there telling how we feel. We're telling what is happening. And we're giving people a better explainer than they can get from these corporate shills in the mainstream media. And that is exactly what they are. And for a long time, believe it or not, CBS was the best out of all the worst. They actually had the least corporate influence than all of the other outlets. And then, yeah, like you said with that Moonves clip there, that was a huge turning point. And that is when things at CBS really started to kind of get, upside down. And they're still going down that path because, yeah, hiring a former Trump official, oh my God, we can absolutely market that. Maybe we can steal a little bit of that audience, or maybe at the very least, get some of the middling Republicans who maybe aren't quite sure, like, oh, okay, well, there's a friend of ours on the TV now. This is a friendly outlet that we can start watching. Whatever their motivation is, at the end of the day, it's always money. And they're going to make a ton of it off this decision, I guarantee you.
Well, we got to take a break, but when we come back, looks like the private healthcare industry has now set its targets on John Fetterman, who's running for Senate out of Pennsylvania. We'll tell you about the PAC that's going after him, what their plan is, and how they're pretending to be progressives to trip people up. We've got that story and more when we come back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Franklin Sharpslicer has a pretty funny comment. Anna, I'm kind of angry with you. You have COVID yet still look cool. When I had it, like it or not, people wanted to have me shot. Farron, you are part of our TYT meal. You keep it honest, you keep it real.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I am very lucky in that the only symptoms I've experienced so far have been fatigue and also today, a relentless headache. The fatigue has kind of subsided. The headache is really, really bad, but I'm still able to do the show luckily, so I'm happy about that. Lars Nielsen says, Lauren Boebert's newest contribution to the culture war is to lead a resolution to honor the runner-up to a transgender swimmer as the rightful winner in a competition. Jesus Christ. Most important thing for her in a time where there's crisis around every corner. Yeah, that's right. This is what they do with the power that they've been given. It's unbelievable. Ganja Grandma says, Anna, I live in Austin, Texas, and my rent just went up $500. Holy moly, $2,300 in Austin, Texas for rent. It's a 2-bedroom duplex. When I moved in 3 years ago, my rent was $1,400. It's crazy. So many people are experiencing what you're experiencing right now throughout the country. And there's absolutely no end in sight, no action, either on the state, local level or the federal level. It's really sick. Molly Mall says, hey Anna, always dope to see you. Have you tried the hotline where you get pep talks from kindergartners? NPR mentioned it. It's amazing. Best wishes. I don't know about that. I got to look into it because it sounds super cute. Kids are great. Sometimes when I'm super down, I will bother my brother and sister-in-law until they allow me to come over and see my nieces. It always puts me in a good mood. And it's great because like after I feel better, I get to go home where I don't have kids and I get really good sleep. All right, let's go to our members section. Tatiana in Japan says, so happy to see Farron on the show today. And as always, I love watching you too, Anna. Thank you for the support. Mr. Lumberg, AKA Inatech Dragon says, wait, what? Is she one of those abortions for me, but not for thee folks? We don't know where the fetuses came from. So we don't know if they're her fetuses or if they're the fetuses she stole from some other facility. We'll update you guys as we learn more. It's developing. Terry says, WTF was this woman doing? Make fetus Frankensteins? Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, what was her intention? What was she planning on doing? It's just very creepy. And Sina says, this is the freakiest thing I've ever heard. Why does this woman have so much hate in her? She doesn't seem okay. There's something else going on with this woman. I did a pretty deep dive in my research on her, and she seems like she might have gone through something traumatic, and she's using this terrible activism to like work through it. And it's not working for her because she might be spending a lot of time in a federal prison soon. Anyway, we got to get back to the show and we'll get to the John Fetterman story. Don't miss it. See you then. Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Farron Cousins with you. Most of our audience is familiar with you, Farron. You're the host of Ring of Fire, but for those of you who might be seeing you for the first time, where can they find out more about you and the work you do?
The best place, obviously, the Ring of Fire YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Ring of Fire. I've been doing this, since 2004, I guess. Very long time. I'm very tired, but it's a ton of fun. But also, find me social media across all of them. I'm at Farron Balanced, which is a lot less funny now that Fox News has changed their slogan a couple years ago. So, I still got it. I had already registered all the names, so I'm not changing it. So I am Farron Balanced.
No, I love it. I think it's a super clever name. I love that. All right, well, why don't we talk a little bit about how, the private insurance companies realize that a politician or a candidate actually, who's not so friendly to them is likely to win in Pennsylvania. So now they're funding efforts to destroy his candidacy. So, corporations are ready to attack now that John Fetterman is performing extremely well in his Senate race in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, since he supports a single payer healthcare system, you can imagine that private insurance companies like Cigna are not too happy about him. And so it turns out that they have basically created this political action committee that is led by one of their consultants to put out all sorts of smears and propaganda against Fetterman, while also ensuring that they raise enough money for his political opponent in the primary, of course, Connor Lamb. Connor Lamb is the conservative Democrat in that race. Now, the super PAC, Penn Progress, and we'll get back to the name of this political action committee in just a moment, says it is supporting conservative Democrat Representative Connor Lamb in the Pennsylvania race because he represents the party's strongest chance to flip the seat, which is not true, despite the group's own polling that finds that Fetterman, the lieutenant governor, is trouncing Lamb in the primary and performing better than Lamb against at least one top Republican candidate. And that's, by the way, according to Politico. And the numbers really do speak for themselves. Not only is Fetterman, doing way better than Connor Lamb in the polling, he's also doing much better than him in regard to campaign donations. So Fetterman's campaign ended last year with $5.3 million on hand, while Lamb had raised $3 million. Penn Progress recently warned donors that Fetterman is leading Lamb by 30 points. And even winning among Democrats who want a moderate candidate. So on one hand, they're like, no, we're supporting, listen, homies, we're definitely supporting Connor Lamb. He's got the best shot, okay? We gotta support him. And then they talk about their own data that shows how well Fetterman is doing compared to Connor Lamb, because it turns out that voters, whether we're talking about moderate voters, whether we're talking about conservatives, whether we're talking about progressives, see that we are living under a broken economic system, a healthcare system that doesn't work. And Fetterman, of course, is very vocal about that. And before I get to you and hear your thoughts, Farron, I thought I would share this video with the audience because it shows you just the kind of politician Fetterman really is. Let's watch.
One cold hard fact is that John Fetterman is a blunt-talking, self-described progressive intent on also breaking through with swing voters in the Rust Belt. His pet issues include a higher minimum wage.
If you believe that a human being should toil for $7.25 an hour, vote for the other person.
And legal marijuana, which he says is a winner for either party. You called it a political bazooka.
Yeah, they're arguing over these small wedge issues when they're leaving the bazooka of legal weed, they're on the table for the other side to grab. Like South Dakota, arguably the most conservative state in our country, voted for legal weed straight up and down on the ballot.
In a state that has, a severe opioid problem, why you're talking about legalizing another drug?
Because it's not a drug, it's a plant. It's a gateway to finding a completely natural alternative to the kind of relief that had brought so many people into this toxic spiral with opioids in the first place.
And of course, it shouldn't come as any surprise that private health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies don't want the federal legalization of marijuana, something that people can rely on for medicinal uses rather than pharmaceutical drugs. Farron, this is so par for the course. It reminds me of what they did to Nina Turner in her congressional race.
Yeah, it's the same blueprint. I mean, we see this happen all the time when you have this, good progressive candidate that's actually talking about issues that matter, proposing solutions that work and actually benefit people. So, oh my God, we got to go out there and we got to stop him, because the latest poll from the Hill and Emerson College out today, he's beating Connor Lamb by 23 points right now. I mean, Lamb is getting destroyed right now. So of course they pull out all the stops. We got to go crying to the corporate masters and say, please do something. We don't want any of this good stuff. And it makes no sense to me, right? We're gonna propose an $813 billion military budget at a time when the US is allegedly not involved in war for the first time ever. We still are, we know that, but there's always money for that. And then Fetterman and some other sitting politicians too, they propose these real things that have real impacts on people's lives. And immediately these corporations come out guns blazing, trying to hide what it is they're doing, who is doing what behind the scenes, who's funding this even, like you said, trying to switch it up with the name like Penn Progress.
Right.
No, we first of all, we got to have more transparency in this country with regard to these super PACs, which God knows we'll never get, but they don't want things to change, because as much as they're terrible for every one of us, things could not be better right now if you're a corporation in the United States. You're making money hand over fist. Your profits in 2021 off the charts. We're getting hit with inflation. We're getting hit with gas prices. Oil companies are making more money than they know what to do with. And all the politicians want us to do is blame the other people. Republicans are blaming Democrats. Democrats are blaming Republicans. It's the corporations, right? Those are the people that we need to be directing our anger at, and we need to be supporting the politicians who aren't afraid to stand up to them, which isn't a lot of them. So we need to protect the ones that do.
Yeah, and the thing that I really appreciate about Fetterman is, dare I say, a quality that Trump had that appealed to the right wing, which was how relatable. I mean, it sounds ridiculous because of who Trump really is as a person, but his form of communication, which can come across as pretty idiotic to people like us, resonated with his constituents because he seemed accessible. He seemed like a real person, as opposed to some fake polished politician who doesn't really believe in anything. And so what exactly is the plan here? What is Penn Progress planning on doing? Well, as you can imagine, they see that the voters in Pennsylvania don't really like Lamb. They're not donating to him. They want the silence of the Lamb. But instead, Penn Progress is like, well, maybe we can get some outside funding and not rely on voters in the state. So Penn Progress has set a fundraising goal of $8 million. While the group only raised $35,000 last year, super PACs can raise money quickly, as we know, because they're permitted to accept donations of any size. Veteran Democratic strategist James Carville, of course, is making an appearance here. He has started promoting Penn Progress, according to Politico. In an email from Carville to potential donors, he said that Lamb was set to join a call with super PAC supporters. And by the way, they're also trying to paint Fetterman as some dangerous, like socialist. They say while Fetterman might actually be Democrats' best chance to take the seat, Politico obtained a slide deck prepared for donors showing that Penn Progress is preparing to attack him as a socialist who supports a government takeover of healthcare. And listen, for people like us, that doesn't sound scary. I want nothing more than to have a single payer healthcare system. Words like socialist doesn't scare young voters, doesn't scare us. But it is unfortunately still scary for some of the older voters, maybe even some of the independent voters that, of course, the Democratic candidate would need in order to win the Senate race. And so we'll see how this plays out. I mean, Fetterman has such a strong lead, but it isn't far-fetched for him to experience the same fate that Nina Turner did. And we gotta prevent that from happening. We gotta fight back, and we gotta apply pressure to anyone we might know in Pennsylvania to do what they can to support Fetterman, because he would be far better for the state of Pennsylvania and for the country if he got that Senate seat.
He really would, and I almost feel sometimes when you talk about Carville wants to get involved to derail Fetterman, I feel like Democrats, these old school Carville type people, they would rather actually lose a seat than have a good, real, progressive, traditional Democrat. I mean, 60 years ago, what Fetterman's talking about, that was just a regular old Democrat. It wasn't radical, it wasn't extreme. But they would rather lose than see somebody like him succeed. Totally. Because of course it would mean that they're outdated, that their views, their ideas, their concepts are no longer accurate. Carville's still working off the same playbook he's been using for 30 years. It won you 2 elections because, Ross Perot siphoned off enough voters for Bill Clinton to win, which is something that does not get talked about enough. Had it not been for Perot, wouldn't have won. But Carville still takes credit. Look what I did. I got this guy in there for 2 terms. Clearly I'm the best, I'm the smartest. Everybody listen to me. No, you're an old has-been who hasn't had a good idea in years, and people need to stop paying attention to him, and he just needs to retire at this point.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. My favorite thing about Carville is when he whines about wokeism in the Democratic Party. And it's like, why do you think Democratic politicians mostly focus all of their energy on so-called virtue signaling or culture war stuff? It's the same reason why we see it on the right wing. They pretend like they want to represent the best interests of disenfranchised communities. They claim they want to protect people's rights if they're part of the LGBTQ community. But when push comes to shove, once they're in a position of power, they do very little to actually protect these groups. They, just like Republicans use those very issues from a right-wing perspective, I see Democrats doing the same thing. And of course, yes, I'm talking about corporate Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, kneeling in a kente cloth to pretend like she actually cares about police reform, but then they don't actually do a damn thing about police reform. That's what the Democratic Party, the mainstream corporate Democratic Party has become. They want to keep the status quo. They're funded by the same corporations that Republicans are funded by. Let's keep it real. So we got to end the first hour, unfortunately, but after our break, we've got more stories for you, including a surprisingly good moment for Juan Williams on Fox News. We'll show you that video and more. Don't miss it.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Jank. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? It was a white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it though.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Sexual anarchy. That's horrifying.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Farron Cousins with you. I wanted to read just one comment from our Twitch viewer. I thought it was a really sweet comment, and it's also BH Red's birthday. BH Red's been with us for 10 months, subscribed through Prime, and here's the comment. I wanted to wait for my birthday to share this. Thanks for making sense, if any, of this world. You guys are my birthday present every day. BH Red, we love you. And I'm so grateful for audience members like you. We wouldn't be able to even do what we do without people like you watching us, supporting us, and sharing words of encouragement like that. So happy birthday. I hope you have a wonderful day, wonderful week. And you know what? Screw it. Be like, honestly, most women I know, don't just celebrate your birthday, celebrate your month, okay? It's your birthday month. So, all right, well, why don't we get to our next story? Because there was an interesting moment. There aren't many interesting moments on Fox News, but I definitely appreciated this.
Right now, you know, conservative media is not paying attention to Trump asking Putin in the middle of a war, can you get me some more dirt on Hunter Biden? To me, that's an outrage too.
Juan Williams speaking out against conservative media, especially conservative media that he regularly appears on, Fox News. Now, there's this unbelievable obsession with Hunter Biden's laptop, which, to be quite honest with you, for me has been one of the most boring stories, because who cares about Hunter Biden unless there's something taking place that deals with corruption and has an impact on our lives or our government. So far, the right wing has failed to prove anything in that regard, but they're still obsessed about it, and they're furious, absolutely furious, that media outlets are refusing to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop incessantly like they are. So Juan Williams decided to jump in and call him out. Let's watch.
On this network, you had the business partner of Hunter Biden, Tony Bobolinsky, a firsthand source, giving a point of view on this. I mean, isn't that something to be covered?
Yeah, but again, you don't know exactly what's going on. And I think you have to be careful before you discredit or put out something that, especially given what happened in 2016, especially then, you're going to put out something days before an election that is going to be politically damaging to one side or the other. And I think that's what you're dealing with. I mean, look, we're talking about mainstream media. Right now, conservative media is not paying attention to Trump asking Putin in the middle of a war, can you get me some more dirt on Hunter Biden? To me, that's an outrage too.
I mean, Farron, how could we not be talking about Bobolinsky? We should be talking about Bobolinsky. The American people really want to know about what Bobolinsky had to say. I mean, so stupid.
It really is. And I hadn't even heard the Bobolinsky name. God, I can't even tell you the last time. It's been probably since the day the story broke. But what gets me about this whole Hunter Biden laptop thing, how many people's hands has this thing been through? I mean, just this week, Matt Gaetz holds up an external hard drive and he says, in Congress, I have the contents of the laptop and I'm putting it into the congressional record. Rudy Giuliani allegedly had the contents of the laptop as well and gave it to the FBI. And then, of course, let's not forget the very bizarre claim that Tucker Carlson had the contents and then mailed them to himself. And then, oops, they got lost in the mail. So there's at least 3 hardcore right-wing individuals who have all said they had the contents. So what's in it? Where's the leak? I refuse to believe that these people, 1, if they had it, didn't look in it. And 2, if they found anything, it would have been all over conservative media. These guys would not have kept their mouths shut. And also, there's no way Tucker Carlson actually mailed it to himself. That's idiotic. So we can rule him out as a potential thing. But Matt Gaetz holding it up on a flash drive, dude, go plug it in right now and show us what's on it.
Totally.
I mean, I imagine that's a massive invasion of privacy. But at the same time, if there's a there, where is it? It's like Mike Lindell. You claim you've got all this evidence and it's going to change the world. Could we just see it? Like if Hunter Biden committed a crime, go for it. I'm not going to lose any sleep if Hunter Biden gets prosecuted for breaking the law. That doesn't affect me. I don't care about it. Sure, if he did it, do it. But you can't just go out there and drag us along all the time being like, I've got a hard drive. It's going to be something. No, it's not. If it were, you would have told us months ago.
Yeah, and that's the reason why all of these Hunter Biden updates are incredibly boring to me because you're right. I'm not again, look, if there is evidence that Hunter Biden broke the law or he did something that specifically has an impact on how Joe Biden is governing, what's happening in our government, I will report on that because I have something substantive to share with my audience. But all we've gotten from these right wingers has been nonstop innuendo. If they have the goods, why not show us what the issue is? Give us the receipts, show us the evidence. But they have nothing. They have nothing. And it's just really remarkable to me that they're able to even have a single news cycle on these types of stories. Like what do they talk about? How do you do a segment based on nothing but innuendo? I really don't. It actually, look, I will give them credit. That must be an incredible skill because I couldn't do it.
I have to imagine, how easy it is to be a producer over at Fox News. I spent the early part of my career as a producer. It was hard work. I would spend 10 hours a day doing research and putting packets together and looking for people to talk intelligently about an issue. Over at Fox, it's got to be just like, whatever. I mean, we just made this up, but sure, we threw something in the prompter for you. I mean, go for it. I'm busy. It's got to be the easiest job in the world. And, I'm not trying to disrespect those producers, but at the same time, y'all are the ones putting this together. It's not just the people on the air. There's a lot of people behind the scenes. Think of the graphics department. People have to make those horrible graphics that they see on the air. So it's a lot of people involved in all of this misinformation and misdirection coming from Fox News, but it's got to be a pretty sweet gig because facts don't matter and you can just make whatever you want and you pretty much know they're going to say it on the air.
Totally. And I mean, it's nice when you sometimes have a little bit of pushback, and that's what we got with Juan Williams there. And I just want to quickly mention, I do appreciate the fact that he called them out on their refusal to cover the fact that the former president of the United States has now called on Russia for what? The third time? To assist in digging up dirt on his political opponent. And the argument from Kelly McEnany is, well, Trump's not president anymore. Yeah, but he's gonna run in 2024. He's doing it for political reasons, much like he did when he withheld military funds from Zelensky. That was the first reason why he was impeached. I mean, it's just what he does. He thinks he's a mob boss. He thinks he can run the country like a mob boss. He thinks he could run a campaign like a mob boss. But I mean, I want to say there are rules in place, except are there really? Because he hasn't suffered a damn consequence for calling on a foreign leader to dig up dirt on his political opponents.
And it just brings me back to, like, don't you think if Putin had any dirt that would hurt the Biden administration, that it probably would have been leaked the moment that we put sanctions on Russia, that are crippling their economy? I have to imagine Putin wouldn't just sit there on information like that and say, well, it's maybe not the time to do it. We'll wait this out. No, it's always the same thing. If the dirt exists, they're gonna show us, they're gonna tell us. But beyond that, absolutely, this is nuts that we still have Donald Trump. Every time he gets in trouble, he goes out there whining like, oh, Putin, do you have something to help me out here because I'm really in a jam? I think people need to pay more attention to that this is the guy that Trump clearly always turns to whenever he needs some kind of dirty trick. And I don't think that's a coincidence at this point.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to some updated news on COVID, particularly something that was being touted as a treatment that turns out to not be a treatment, something that we've been telling you guys for quite some time now. So turns out that ivermectin is not a treatment for coronavirus. It is not effective, and its efficacy was called into question in a recent study. This is the largest study looking at the efficacy of ivermectin as a treatment for coronavirus. And here's what we have found, okay? The study, which compared more than 1,300 people infected with the coronavirus in Brazil who received either ivermectin or a placebo, effectively ruled out the drug as a treatment for COVID. There's really no sign of any benefit, said Dr. David Boulware, an infectious disease expert at the University of Minnesota. So let me just pause for a second and say, for all of the conspiracy theorists out there, for all of the bad faith actors like Jimmy Dore that were spreading disinformation about how, they're not studying ivermectin, they're not studying it. They did study it. They studied it quite a few times actually, but this is now the most extensive study, and it is now proving definitively that ivermectin, which is used to treat parasitic infections typically, is not a sound treatment for coronavirus. So what the naysayers would point to was a study that was done by Dr. Hill. This was an early study where researchers were actually trying thousands of old drugs against COVID-19 to see if any of them could potentially be effective against it. And a virologist named Andrew Hill concluded that ivermectin appeared to be a treatment. It significantly lowered the risk of death from COVID-19. But then there were some issues with that study that they kept pointing to. Not long after Dr. Hill published his review last summer, reports surfaced that many of the studies he included in this meta-analysis were flawed and in at least one case alleged to be fraudulent. Dr. Hill retracted. He did this publicly, even on Twitter several times, retracted his original study and started a new one, which he published in January. On their second review, Dr. Hill and his colleagues focused on the studies least likely to be biased. And in that stricter survey, ivermectin's benefit vanished. But Farron, that wasn't good enough for people. I guess they needed yet another study to prove that ivermectin really had no impact as a treatment for coronavirus. But I'm curious if you think this latest study will have any impact on what they think.
Honestly, probably not. And the reason I say that is because unfortunately, I've had to deal with the anti-vax movement, and I'm bringing them up. I know this isn't vax, but I've been dealing with them since long before the COVID anti-vaxxers and this thing became widespread. And I'm sure a lot of people understand what I'm talking about if you know the history of Ring of Fire here. The problem is these hardcore deniers always think that if a study gets updated, if a scientist comes out and retracts these studies, they think it's because the industry put pressure on the individual to do it. So they don't believe that the retraction is real. They believe, it's smoke signals, that there's some kind of coded language in there maybe that says that, hey, I'm doing this, but I'm being forced to do it. That's not what happens. I mean, we've had plenty of studies now showing that ivermectin is not effective against this. Is it wonderful against parasitic infections? Hell yeah, it is. Got the Nobel Prize for that. Yeah. Not for being a COVID treatment, as some of these people have said. It won the Nobel Prize. Yeah, but you got to finish that sentence before you move on to the next thing. So no, it's not effective. But unfortunately, these folks are so deep into this conspiracy theory that they can't just come out and say, oopsie daisies, I guess we were wrong. You know these guys as well as anybody else does. They have too much arrogance and pride to go out there and tell their audience they were wrong. The hardcore movement out there beyond just the YouTubers, they have too much riding on this. They've staked their reputations on this. They're gonna continue to push it, and they're gonna say that the new study is fake, that it was funded, by Big Pharma to trash ivermectin because they don't seem to know that ivermectin's owned by Big Pharma. Not quite sure how they reconcile that, but they do somehow in their brains. And I wish it would change their minds, but I think these people are just too deep to let it go at this point.
Yeah, there's definitely something wrong with you when your own ego or your own arrogance takes priority over giving people information that could save their lives. Because you mentioned the anti-vax movement, and they're definitely not two separate issues. Ivermectin was being touted as a substitute for the vaccine. The very people who were promoting ivermectin as a treatment were essentially saying to people, well, there are some dangerous side effects associated with this vaccine. Oftentimes they were pretty ignorant when they were arguing those points as well. But then they would provide ivermectin as a possible alternative for people who don't want to get vaccinated. Listen, I'm happy that I'm fully vaccinated and boosted. I can't imagine what I would feel like right now if I hadn't done that, because my symptoms with COVID have been very mild. Fatigue has been, kind of an annoying part of it, but it's not crippling to the point where I can't do my job. I'm still able to do my job. Today I have a little bit of a headache, but I'm not so sick that I need to be hospitalized. I'm not worried about dying from COVID. And this is where we want everyone to be. We want people who might contract COVID in the future to have mild symptoms. We don't want them to get tremendously sick. We don't want them to be hospitalized. But these goons out there who have been peddling this stuff, let's not forget about the component of honestly making money off of it, right? And it's not just through their programming. It's also the very doctors who have made money slanging ivermectin as a COVID treatment through telemedicine. That's a huge part of the story as well. So there's a capitalistic angle to it, along with the egoists and the narcissists who just can't admit when they're wrong. And it's a shame because people die as a result. And if you have a major platform, if you have, let's say, the top podcast in the country, I think it actually bodes well for you. It adds to your credibility if you could admit when you're wrong. But recently, Joe Rogan actually had another message in regard to his podcast. And I want to show you that video real quick. Let's watch.
If I become something different because it grew bigger, I'll quit. If it gets to a point where I can't do it anymore, where I have to do it in some sort of weird way, where I walk on eggshells, and mind my P's and Q's, that.
I don't want Rogan to walk on eggshells. I wouldn't want anyone to have to walk on eggshells. People should be free to speak their mind. However, don't be peddling medical advice that is not sound, that is not proven, because people will die as a result of that. And people trust him, whether he wants to believe it or not, whether he wants to accept it or not, he has a responsibility as someone who has this massive platform full of guys who trust him and really do take his advice to heart.
It's, you don't want to call it a cult following, but you kind of have to at the same time. But no, you're right. I mean, look, if you have a platform, whether you want to have it or not, it comes with a responsibility. And you do have that job. When you go out there and you push these things that are later proven to be untrue, it's your responsibility, not even just as a podcaster or as a whatever, but as a human being, to go out there and own up to your mistake and be like, hey, man, I screwed the pooch on this one. I'm really sorry, guys. Turns out I was totally wrong. I've had to do it, not frequently, thank goodness. But there've been plenty of times where I have to go back and do another video and say, hey, listen, I said a thing the other day. Turns out, man, was I way off. And it's, it's not fun, it's not pleasant, but you can make it to where people understand, like, hey, I messed up. I didn't do my due diligence on this. I maybe rushed the story to get out there, and that was my fault. And I'm not going to do that in the future. And as you move forward, you start making those mistakes less and less. But when you don't own up to it, that's when you just show that, one, you don't care about your audience, two, you don't care about your credibility, and three, that you're going to continue to do it, because that's the real slippery slope that people don't think about. Once you get lied to, once you know you can get away with a lie, it's going to continue happening more and more until you end up with something that really is unrecognizable from what it started out as. And I think we've seen that with a lot of these ivermectin pushers. They're sure as hell not what they were 5-6 years ago compared to today. And it's because they were on that slope, and this is just where they've landed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. And I would just say, have faith in your audience. Have faith that they respect you and they respect when you can admit when you're wrong. In fact, my experience has been when I'm willing to say, oh, look, I kind of got that wrong. I mean, I'll give you a specific example. My prediction about Russia invading Ukraine was wrong. I mean, it was a prediction, and it's clear that I was predicting, but when you get it wrong, you get it wrong, and you got to admit it, right? It would be insane to somehow pretend as if, no, I got it right from the very beginning. I didn't make any mistakes. Come on. Anyway, all right. Well, we got to take a quick break, but when we come back, the Madison Cawthorn Orgygate saga continues now with the Roger Stone angle. So stick around. We'll give you those details and more.
Sexual anarchy. Sexual anarchy.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. Just want to say thank you to Dave Schmidt in our Twitch community who gifted 2 subs. As a recipient of gifted subs, I can just say that it's always appreciated. It's wonderful. So thank you for doing that. Moving over to our YouTube members. Allison, thank you for becoming a new YouTube member. Same for you, James T and Life Gur. You guys help to keep us sustainable. And for those of you who aren't members yet, you can become one by clicking on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Michael Nourish says, hi Farron, love Ring of Fire and Fair and Balanced. I have always been fascinated by names and yours is unusual. What is the etymology?
I honestly, I wish I knew. The only thing I really know about my name is that I can never find it on a keychain. You know, I can't ever find it on a mug when I go to the souvenir shops. But no, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I know nothing about my name, where it came from, why I have it. It's not even the name that my parents called me growing up. I had a really horrible, very Southern nickname that I am not going to share with anyone. So it wasn't really until, I started school that people started calling me Farron, and it was only at school. And yeah, I've already said too much. Like I'm nope, not gonna happen, because I'm gonna eventually spill the beans and I'm gonna be embarrassed. So it's not gonna happen.
Well, the funny thing is, so my full first name is Anahit, which is a very common Armenian name. And Anahit is the goddess of fertility, which my parents really struck out with it, not the goddess of fertility. I mean, I could be, I think, I'm not sure, I haven't tried. But yeah, no kids. Sorry, mom and dad. All right, Valiant Orion says, it's sad that the biggest consequence Trump has suffered since leaving office was being banned by Twitter. That's actually very true. And stick around, because we have a story related to that I'm sure you're gonna enjoy, because that Twitter ban is like, he's up at night thinking about it. He's obsessed with that. Seahorse Dragon says, don't people understand if ivermectin worked for COVID, Merck would reap enormous rewards? Merck said it didn't work. Case should have been closed long ago. I know, but you're hoping that people have common sense. Larry, thank you for the super chat. There's no comment, but I appreciate the super chat. Also want to move over to our members. Imploded Brainy says, Fetterman's race worries me. They screwed Nina too, just waiting for Hillary to rear her ugly head. I think it's less about Hillary and more about the money, because the money buys you all sorts of fear-mongering, deceptive ads. So I would be concerned about that, which is why if you're in Pennsylvania, get involved with Fetterman's campaign. It's really important that we support him and help him win. All right, for now though, we got to get back to the show. See you there.
Sexual anarchy.
Welcome back, everyone. Anna Kasparian and Farron Cousins with you. This is the part of the show where we lighten things up a little bit. And what could be lighter than this ongoing Orgygate saga involving Representative, I can't believe he's a representative, Madison Cawthorn. So the latest installment has to do with his talk with Kevin McCarthy, what resulted from that, and I want to give you those details. So, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy had a talking to with Madison Cawthorn after Cawthorn, of course, put out some strange allegation regarding members of the Republican caucus inviting him to orgies that also happened to have cocaine involved. So, of course, you're gonna have some Republican lawmakers who are concerned about that because they're like, what the hell kind of accusation is that? Many suspected that he was making it up. And now it turns out that that could be true. Now, first, I wanna just share this awesome photo with you because this is Madison Cawthorn leaving his meeting with Kevin McCarthy. And his face is just super red. It looks like he got yelled at. Looks like he was like reprimanded. And I'm honestly here for it. Olivia Beavers, who's been covering this story from the beginning, says Representative Madison Cawthorn just left McCarthy's office. He met with the GOP leader and Minority Whip Steve Scalise for roughly 30 minutes. Cawthorn didn't respond to my questions about the meeting as he was leaving. Well, Kevin McCarthy later released a statement about it and basically said that it looks like Cawthorn was making things up. This is unacceptable. There is no evidence to this. Cawthorn changes what he tells and did not tell the truth. His actions are not becoming of a congressman. Okay, let's pause for a second, Farron, because there have been many actions by Madison Cawthorn that I would venture to say are not becoming of a member of Congress. But it's just amazing how Orgygate, an accusation that members of the Republican caucus are engaging in cocaine-fueled orgies, is the one place where Kevin McCarthy decided to draw the line.
Yeah, as soon as he starts talking about Republicans, then it's like, oh my God, somebody go talk to this kid. With his red face like that, I don't know. Part of me kind of thinks he may have been crying a little bit, which is okay, it happens. But I love this story so much, and to be honest, I want to believe Madison Cawthorn. I want to believe that this is what is in fact happening with these Republican lawmakers. And I got to tell you, before the talking to, but after the meeting that they had on Tuesday morning, you had all these Republicans coming out, including Dan Crenshaw was one of them, saying, Madison, why don't you name names? Tell us who these people are. Like they were a little overly eager to find out who's throwing these massive parties that clearly these guys are not getting invited to. So yeah, I really would like to be like, Madison, who's doing this, man? Just between me and you, I'm not gonna tell anybody. But if next time, just hit me up, man. No, but for real, he embarrassed the Republican Party. So that's why he gets this talking to. It didn't matter, the allegations that have come out against him from some of the women who went to college with him. Didn't matter that he lied about the accident that paralyzed him. Didn't matter that he lied about getting into the Naval Academy, which also didn't happen. As soon as he did something that could endanger the Republican Party's reputation, that's when it got out of hand. And that's why, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't get a talking to like this. Paul Gosar doesn't, Lauren Boebert doesn't, because they're not going after the party as a whole. But I do still, again, Madison Cawthorn's being really weird with this because he also did tweet out a day or two ago, what was it? Signals, not noise. Just that weird cryptic line. So there's something weird here. The kid is a liar, absolutely. But there could be a little nugget of truth in there somewhere. And I'm holding out hope that there is one.
Well, it's interesting because your interpretation or a perspective on people like Dan Crenshaw demanding he name names, it's just different from the way I perceived it. I perceived it as, seems like everyone kind of hates Matt Gaetz, and it seems like they suspect it's Matt Gaetz, and they're like trying to get Cawthorn because Cawthorn specifically mentioned that it was lawmakers that he admired. And so Matt Gaetz is more in line with Cawthorn. He's like the MAGA flavor. I know that the Republican Party overall is MAGA flavor, but there are the old school traditional Republicans who just kind of had to, swallow the fact that their constituents like Trump. And then there are the true MAGA admirers. And I think Matt Gaetz falls under that category. I think Madison Cawthorn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, they're all under that category. And Matt Gaetz certainly has some pretty credible allegations against him, including from other Republican lawmakers who claim that he would do all sorts of incredibly uncomfortable things, like show, explicit images of women that he allegedly slept with, whatever it is. So I thought maybe that's what they were trying to do. Like, I think they want to get rid of Matt Gaetz, and this was a way to do it. But Kevin McCarthy also said this after the meeting: there's a lot of different things that can happen, but I just told him he's lost my trust. He's going to have to earn it back. I mean, he's got a lot of members very upset. And by the way, Republicans would want nothing more than for this story to just go away, including Madison Cawthorn. I want to go to this tweet by the Federalist that Madison decided to retweet. And the line here is, outrage over Madison Cawthorn is a distraction, and Republicans are taking the bait. In other words, this doesn't look good. Please stop talking about it. Please stop, especially as they're trying to moralize about everything, whether it be reproductive rights, transgender rights. I mean, we just see that all over the place. They have really gone in with this full-blown assault on the rights of various groups of people who have been disenfranchised and discriminated against in this country.
You know, to bring it back, I mean, you're absolutely right about that, but also to bring it back to Matt Gaetz, you know, when you have guys like that in Congress who do have all of these, you know, allegations against them, that lends more credence to what Madison Cawthorn says as well. You know, that suddenly is not out of the realm of possibilities. Now, we don't know if it's Matt Gaetz, obviously, but that is a good reason to name names. I always like to think that it's because these guys are bummed that they're not getting invited to it. But if there is something happening that could potentially be illegal, then yeah, that is something people need to know. If it's just a bunch of people, consenting adults, doing fun time in their time off, look, there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing wrong with it, of course, as you just pointed out, is the hypocrisy of you trying to police as a party what other people can do with, you know, their genitalia, but you're going up there having happy fun time every time Congress adjourns. That's not okay, and that's the hypocrisy that, to be honest, they're kind of immune to. You know, they don't have any shame. They even if they got busted, it still doesn't change what they want to do. But maybe it'll open up a few people's eyes, and that's what I always say is about the best we can hope for with stories like this. That maybe a couple people wake up and realize they're being lied to by these Republicans, and you know, over time it adds up to more and more. But you're not going to change a ton of minds. But if you can get to a couple, then hey, that's a victory at this point.
Well, you should know that there were more Republican lawmakers who decided to do some finger wagging, including Senator Richard Burr from North Carolina, who called Cawthorn an embarrassment at times, while Senator Tom Tillis said the lawmaker has a lack of judgment and had not done much for his House district, which is honestly an understatement. But the one person who seems to believe Cawthorn is Roger Stone, who's gotten caught up in his own sex scandals in the past. He says Congressman Madison Cawthorn just told me has not retracted his claims about drug-fueled orgies among DC elites. Why would anyone believe a statement by Kevin McCarthy or anything reported on CNN? McCarthy is a corrupt rhino, Republican in name only, and CNN lies about everything. And if anyone knows about sex scandals in DC, it would be someone like Roger Stone, to be fair.
You know, they're going so hard on this story, and honestly, like I almost want to take the Federalist position. Like they should have said nothing, right? This would have been a funny little news cycle that popped and disappeared by now. But the fact that the Republicans, wanted to weigh in on this, and of course now you got Roger Stone almost weighing in to defend what Cawthorn says and maybe throw more Republicans under the bus. They're keeping this alive. And I'm here for it all day. Like, me too. This is wonderful. This is such a fun story to talk about anyway. But I want the names too. And I think if the Republicans keep kind of pushing this, if they keep this alive and it's true, then Cawthorn may get to the point where he just says, all right, fine, enough is enough. Here's these people. Here's the people who wanted to do it. Again, that can only happen if it's actually true, but I want them to keep pushing. I want people like Roger Stone to be in Madison Cawthorn's ear, telling him, don't give up on this. Let's keep pushing it. Let's out these rhinos, because this could get a hell of a lot more fun if these people continue to make this a real issue. And like I said, I'm here for it all day.
Oh, are you kidding me? This is the most interesting thing that's happened in the Republican caucus for decades. I mean, I'm here for it as well. All right, but for now, unfortunately, we got to take our final break of the show. When we come back, I want to give you the details of the goodie bags that Oscars nominees received. It will blow your mind. There's money for liposuction included. I'm not kidding. We've got that story and more when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. All right, just want to encourage you guys to check out JR's show, especially if you're loving Farron Cousins on the main show. He was recently on the watch list with JR Jackson. You can check that out weekdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific at youtube.com/watchlistTYT. And if you can't catch it live, don't worry. You could also watch the videos on demand on that YouTube channel as well. Support JR, support Farron, support TYT Network. Watch the show. I promise you, you're gonna love it. All right, let's move over to some of our member comments. Mickey C, the silver hair dragon, says they've had Hunter Biden's laptop for 3 years. The BS is that the hard drive has been copied. Did they get a search warrant for that? If not, they're breaking the law. And if they do find anything, it's inadmissible in court. And how many hands did that pass through? A little problem called chain of command. Mickey C, are you a lawyer? I like that. I like that you're giving us that legal analysis here. Who knows? I just, again, I'm super bored by this story. Every time they bring it up, I can't help but like roll my eyes at it. Pale Blue Dot says, I wish Fetterman was running in Texas. I wish there was a Fetterman-like candidate in every race. Unfortunately, we don't have that, which is why it's so important to support him if you can. Jay the Man in our super chat says, New Mexico, my state, gets recreational cannabis tomorrow. Congratulations, very exciting. Hopefully they get the tax for the marijuana right, unlike California, where the tax is so high that there's still a black market for marijuana, kind of defeating the purpose. I'm all in favor of taxing it, but when you tax it to a point where it still keeps a black market at play, I think that's an issue. Damon says, happy Trans Day of Visibility to my TYT fam. You all make this queer, trans, non-binary guy feel seen and at home here. That makes me really happy. And thank you for your comment. Sarah Kay says, hell yeah, Farron. And that's it, very simple. Jeremy Justice says, Anna was named after the goddess of fertility because she gives life to the most important stories of the day, especially Orgygate. Am I right? You were destined for this. Thank you, I appreciate that. Also, I am the mother, maybe not the biological mother, to my sweet, sweet dog, Charlie. And I don't know what he would do without me, and vice versa. So there's that. All right, let's see if there are any other comments in our member section. All right, Queek says, Farron is a great name. Farron Young's song, Live Fast, Love Hard, Die Young is a country classic. There you have it, Farron.
I will have to look into that. I've never heard it. I did know there was a singer, Farron Young. I think he spells his name differently, or did. I think he's way before my time. But I'll look into that song. That sounds like an interesting title. Hopefully it's not necessarily applying to me, but we'll see.
All right, well, we gotta get back to the show. This next segment's super, super fun. So stick around, we'll be back in just a few seconds.
Sexual anarchy. That's horrifying.
Welcome back, everyone. Anna Kasparian and Farron Cousins with you. We are going to talk about Trump's social media company in the bonus episode for our members. It is failing, and it's failing hard. I mean, to the point where it doesn't even seem like Trump is interested in it anymore. And there could be a scammy angle to it. So if you're not a member, you can become one by going to tyt.com/join, or if you're watching us on YouTube, just click on that join button. Members get all sorts of exclusive members only content, including our daily bonus episode, and you help to keep our show independent and sustainable. For now though, why don't we talk about something super light? It's not political, but I'm always fascinated by it because it just shows you the different world that wealthy celebrities live in. And it also has the Oscars involved, so let's talk. The Oscars were in full swing, and there have been a lot of stories about Will Smith and that slap on the stage, but we need to talk about the goods, including the goods that certain nominees received in the form of a goodie bag. This is something that always fascinates me because these aren't normal goodie bags that you get at like a kid's birthday party, okay? There's no cheap made in China garbage in there. They're getting money or certificates for like liposuction and things like that. And so we've learned some more details about what they received in these goodie bags this year. And apparently they're worth $140,000 and include 53 insanely luxurious and also kind of needless items. So let's give you those details. For the 20th consecutive year, LA-based marketing company Distinctive Assets is distributing its famously expensive Everybody Wins gift bags to select nominees. This year's bag is valued at just over $137,000 and includes items ranging from designer popcorn, which I'm here for that for sure, to a voucher for $12,000 worth of liposuction. The liposuction thing, is that okay? I mean, if you're a celebrity and you got that bag, would you be like, oh, thanks for the voucher for liposuction? You trying to tell me something? Like, what's going on? It's a weird gift to get, but I'm sure it was appreciated. I mean, $12,000 for a procedure like that is pretty good money.
Is it transferable? Because if there's any celebrities out there that don't need it, I can give you my address. I will come out there. I could probably use your $36,000, $48,000 of it. I'm not gonna, be coy about it. I'll do it. I have no problem with that. Do they have coupons for hair restoration? Let me know. I will start starring in movies tomorrow just to get these goodie bags. But no, it is nuts. It is absolutely ridiculous. The value of these things and just the variety. Like you said, I go to conferences quite frequently. You get little bags, you get a book. There's some squishy things in there sometimes. Your stress balls.
There's always a T-shirt in there. Always,
yes,
always. People love to give out T-shirts. It's like their favorite thing in the world. Like, go to an event, get a gift bag. There's a T-shirt in there for sure.
And you never see anybody wearing the shirts either. Can y'all stop with the T-shirts? Just enough with it. If you want to start putting in like, T-shirts for your dog, I'm totally into that. That's a better idea than throwing T-shirts in goodie bags. Give me something for the dog, and I promise you it will get used.
Yeah, look, I have to be fair. A lot of people love the T-shirts, right? It really depends on the event, and like if I know TYT has had events in the past where we've given out goodie bags and there are T-shirts in there, and people like it. So, but like for people like me, I'm not a T-shirt person. Yeah, for sure. But I want to get to other details because the bag had more than just a $12,000 voucher for lipo. Apparently, the most expensive item in this year's bag was a $50,000 3-night stay at Turin Castle in Scotland, inspired by Denzel Washington's Best Actor nomination for The Tragedy of Macbeth. Guests who accept the offer will have full access to the 17th century castle, complete with butler service and a bagpiper welcome when they arrive. Which sounds fun. I mean, that to me was the most appealing thing in that bag. But other things include a $12,000 celebrity arms liposuction procedure from cosmetic surgeon. Hold on. So you don't even get to choose where the lipo happens. It's got to be in your arms. Like, so weirdly specific, right? The title of Lord or Lady of Glencoe, along with a small plot of land in Scotland. They're giving them land in Scotland. Like, just $25,000 worth of home renovations. Oh, okay, now we're having a conversation. From Los Angeles-based Mason Construction, a $15,000 4-night stay for 2 at the Golden Door Luxury Resort, because the one vacation in Scotland wasn't enough. You got to have another luxury vacation in Escondido, California. A small batch tea gift set from Oprah approved the chai box, which is probably the most down-to-earth gift in there. And then a $1,200 life coaching session with wellness expert Coyote Joseph. Fun. I mean, I have a coach. I love her. Her name's Susan. So I can't say anything negative about that. But honestly, the celebrity arms liposuction is the most fascinating part.
What gets me about the whole thing though is, how do you get to be the one to be featured in the bag? Right? I mean, can I submit like a best of Ring of Fire DVD to be given out at next year's Oscars in everybody's bags and make everybody go home and watch our videos? Because that to me is a huge thing for these people. And maybe we ought to start opening it up. Maybe the Oscars needs to look at it and say, hey, maybe we can start promoting some small businesses in here. Maybe there is a way to not only give these people these wonderful, gifts of liposuction and, the title of Lord or Lady, but also say, hey, Joe's Donuts down the street, good locally owned business. Here's a coupon. Go get yourself some donuts too. Show up at this place, make everybody's day. When Brad Pitt walks in for a donut, everybody's gonna freak out about it. You really could have an impact with these bags if you so chose to do it, and maybe throw a couple people a bone every now and then. That would be kind of cool.
No, I kind of love the fact that you're trying to find a way to like co-opt these gift bags as like a marketing ploy for independent media. I think that's actually really smart. I don't know if they're gonna buy it, I don't know if we could actually pull that off. But what was interesting about this is not everyone who went to the Oscars got this gift bag. It was only given to some of the nominees. So not all of the nominees got it. I'm guessing the nominees for the biggest categories received it. And I just love that they call it Everybody Wins, because it's like the participation trophy for wealthy celebrities, right? It's amazing, but honestly, I would love it. I mean, I would not be complaining about it if I received this thing. But there is a catch, and I think this catch is kind of hilarious and also the right thing to do. Listen, we're talking about a gift bag that's worth nearly $140,000, and it's considered taxable income. So though recipients aren't technically paying for any of the gifts, the value of the goods do count as taxable income according to the IRS, so they will have to pay taxes on it. The reality is, if you do get to go on a $50,000 trip and all you have to do is pay a tax percentage of that value, you're obviously still getting a pretty good deal. No one wants a deal more than rich people, and that's the other thing, right? Like, we've heard countless stories about rich people refusing to pay a decent tip to servers. They're usually nickel and diming everyone, including the IRS and the federal government. And so it's just not surprising to me at all that like they would want a good deal, and they might see the downside of having to pay taxes on this, but who's gonna complain with a $12 voucher for arm liposuction, am I right?
And it is a good thing too, because obviously, these businesses, they do it because bringing a celebrity in is obviously going to be huge for your business, but there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So if you want to cash in that $12,000, you got to pay your taxes on it. I'm sure the tea set and things like that, the popcorn, probably not much tax to be had there. But yeah, so yes, they're wealthy. Yes, they get to do all these things and they can afford to do it otherwise, but they're not getting it all for free. They do have to pay taxes, which is more than we can say about a lot of the folks in corporate America too. Not to make this political, trying not to, totally not a political segment. But at least they're paying something, right?
Yeah, it's true. And look, there's politics in everything. And by the way, just a quick update on the whole Will Smith debacle. It turns out that the Academy actually did ask him to leave after he slapped, Chris Rock on the face on stage, and he kind of just refused to do it. And so they're continuing on with this investigation. I mean, there isn't really that much to investigate if you ask me, but they're trying to figure out what the consequences will be, including a potential ban from the Oscars, which I don't really think is gonna happen. I don't think they're gonna ban him. So we'll see what happens with all of that. I honestly, aside from making the point that assault is never okay and we shouldn't be supportive of that, I think we're done with that story. It is what it is. You guys know all the details you need to know. And it's very likely that Will Smith did get this fancy bag complete with all of those goodies that we mentioned. So anyway, that does it for our main show, but the fun doesn't stop for our members. We're about to do our bonus episode immediately after this. TYT.com/join to become a member, or click on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Can't wait to share the story of Trump's social media company failing. See you there.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapo here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored.